So good afternoon, everyone. This is Shahid Akhtar, editor, ET Health World, welcoming you all to ET Health World Virtual Roundtable Conference. Now, the focus of the discussion is to highlight the importance of protecting the entire healthcare force, not just the doctors who are out there combating the COVID. Now, today we have with us Dr. Ravi Bakre, an orthopedic surgeon, NHS UK. He is responsible for reviewing the national guidelines on impact of COVID, development of CR framework, and part of the support NHS procurement team for the supply of PPE. Next, we have with us Dr. Sushila Kataria. She is in the Department of Internal Medicine, Medanta, the Medicity. She is a researcher and a clinician involved in the care of over 60 patients, including the Italian patients who were among the first few COVID-19 patients in India. Next, we have Dr. M.R. Rajagopal, founder chairman of Pallium India and director of Trivandrum Institute of Palliative Science. Now, he is a member of the expert group appointed by the Chief Minister of Kerala in advising him in COVID control. Now, Pallium India has created training programs in palliative care for COVID testing doctors and also initiated an online support program for healthcare providers to deal with the major social and emotional well-being. Next, we have Dr. Raman Kumar, the President, Academy of Family Physicians of India, and he is also the President of WONCA, World Association of Family Doctors. And we have Sister Minimol Varghese. She is the Chief Nursing Officer, Fortis Mulund, Mumbai. She is the driving force in battling COVID, involved in planning, implementation, and coordination protocol and guidelines in maximizing patient benefit. So now we begin with Dr. Raman first. As a general physician, what was your first experience when you came across COVID?
Thank you, Shahid. I'm a full-time family physician. I'm not attached to any hospital. I do not admit my patients. So I see patients in community only. And it is in our routine practice that we see around 70% of my own practice consists of, undifferentiated fever patients, flu-like illnesses. And through January and February, there was a rise of cases, probably because of some awareness coming through mainstream media, televisions about the incoming COVID pandemic. But we were not very prepared for this kind of, because many of us were not expecting, and many of us were thinking that this COVID is something like the previously occurring flus. But however, our understanding dramatically changed over a period of time, and since lockdown and period around that time, there was concerns coming up. Initially when we heard the news of Mohalla clinic doctors getting positive, then we heard general physicians, practitioners getting positive in Mumbai, and the first doctors to die in India, in Indore, the first two were family physicians. So there was a risk associated to run clinics in community setting, because the hospital setting is different from the clinic setting. So although there were some guidelines issued by the local health authorities, we were expected to run the clinics. But it is very challenging in the current given scenario, because often these clinics are small, limited space, and difficult to designate a fever area. And how do you differentiate between COVID, non-COVID, and influenza-like patients? Every fever and cough cold patient could be a potential COVID. So this has changed our practice, and we are, initially we started with taking precautions. Everybody started using masks, sanitizers. We're also giving instructions. We put up notices in the front doors of our clinics to take precautions. But gradually, the thought has come up that we should do more and more of our consultations on telemedicine, and that is what we are doing most of the time. And as the current approach to the
Dr. Can we move to telemedicine afterwards? Can we have a first round of experience from all of you?
Sure.
Now, Dr. Sushila, I have words from you. You were the first to experience COVID patients, and that too from Italy. So what was the first experience like?
So when we were hearing news and everybody was following what's happening in the world, what's happening in China, but by the end of Feb, it has already trickled to Iran and Italy, which were faring bad. So once we heard that this news, and the PMO requested Dr. Trehan to have these 14 patients because they could not be housed for a long in ITBP camp. So Dr. Trehan asked me what to do with that. I said, let's do it. Somebody has to do it. Why not? And we were more than, we thought it is a challenge and we should do it. So, and we had run a mock drill just few days back, just in case if we have patients like this. So that came very handy. But anyway, doing a mock drill and doing a real is a little different scenario. So we were given only 5 hours before the patients would arrive in Medanta to finalize our isolation setup and everything. So in 5 hours, you have to move your PPE, you make an isolation unit, you designate the areas, the entry, exit, the donning, doffing. So everything was done in a very, very swift manner, I would say. And it was at 1 o'clock that we got information. At 6 o'clock, these patients had already landed in Medanta. So disease is new. The dynamics of COVID are changing every day. What I knew yesterday, probably I would know something different tomorrow. So this was a change. At that time, the management protocols were also not very clear in the world. Neither is it now. So we made our own protocols. It was a good learning experience. Throughout looking after these patients was a good drill that we were prepared to have more patients. And I also knew that this is not going to stop there. So currently the number of patients are increasing, and my fear is that by the mid-May, we are all unfortunately may get overwhelmed. So, but this whole process of this experience and these few months have given us time to be prepared for the surge. Now in Gurgaon, we are preparing a isolated private COVID hospital where 3-4 stakeholders are putting in all the manpower and the instruments. So I think we are very well prepared by this time, but let us see. The disease has its force. How strong the force goes, time only will tell.
Dr. Minimoj, your experience as a nurse when you got the first patient.
Yeah, so in Mumbai, we were prepared in the month of March. We have taken our first patient. We started our unit on March 23rd. So we had few days of planning. So first we had to, in Mumbai, Kasturba Hospital was the first government setup which started the COVID patient. So as a private setup, in Fortis, Mulund, we thought we will have a area where more of ICU setup patients. So we had to create, as Dr. Sushila said, a separate COVID OPD. And if any patient has symptoms and we want to keep in daycare, so we had to create a daycare setup and a ICU setup. Now, when it comes to ICU setup, the biggest challenge is manpower. So especially in ICU, there are chances of getting a lot of ventilated patients. So nursing manpower, doctors, and where are we going to put this staffs when they started going into the COVID unit? So that was the first preparation we had done, and shower area and stock of PPE. So, it was a blessing for us that when we thought and when we announced we are going to take the patient during preparation, the doctors, nurses came ahead and said that they are willing to work in the COVID unit. So that was a big piece, and we were assured that we will be able to run this unit successfully because we didn't have to force anyone. They came ahead and they told themselves that they would like to work in the unit, and so far we have done a good job, and we do have a lot of critical patients who are getting admitted, who have treated and got discharged. Good experience. We are still fighting and doing our best to take country into a safer era.
Dr. Ravi?
So I'm Ravi Badge. I'm a consultant orthopedic surgeon in UK. I'm trained in Mumbai with my medical schooling and my post-graduation. With my hat of orthopedic surgeons, I'm quite actively involved in assessing the guidelines for the trust and formalizing SOPs with my local hospital, as well as helping NHS to see whether we can get adequate PPE for our healthcare professionals. I'm also involved in creating a national framework called CARE, which stands for Crisis, Assess, Respond, and Escalate. This is to create an accelerated induction for the workforce, which is currently dealing with the COVID crisis. And that's pretty much me. So back to your question, Shahid, I agree with my co-panelists that the whole COVID crisis has taken us blindsided with the speed it has spread all across the globe. Now, although it started in China in December, by the time it reaches UK was mid-January, early February, and once we've realized that it is reaching stage 3 and going to stage 4, UK started lockdown after WHO announced it as a pandemic. So it has taken everybody with a surprise. The advantage we had as NHS, as its government-led healthcare sector, in contrast to what we see in India, where majority of the healthcare sector still has a private input, and we have certain national bodies, right from GMC, Royal Colleges, Public Health England, which formalizes a guideline for us, and that trickles down to all hospitals. So we have around more than 250 NHS trusts within UK, and that has helped us to kind of streamline our process to deal with this crisis.
Fine. Now, coming over to Dr. Rajagopal, you have enough of time to plan this out because you're not in the emergency situation, and you have always been offering the comfort zone to the patients in cancer. Basically, once we say palliative, we always think of cancer care, but beyond that, it has moved into so many verticals. So, your thoughts on COVID?
Thank you, Shahid. Yes, of course, palliative care is not only for cancer, and it would be the height of injustice if we discriminate in the name of a diagnosis. What palliative care does is to treat serious health-related suffering. That's the phrase, catchphrase. I'll repeat that: treatment of serious health-related suffering. We are all most of the time thinking about the disease, the virus. We seldom think about the impact on human beings. Very often we think about patients as them and we as professionals. Before this pandemic runs out, everyone is going to know someone in one's own acquaintances, friends, or families who has gone through the disease experience and died. So what we are now working on is to address that element of suffering and helping every clinician to deal with that suffering fairly by simple means. And Shahid, as we go along, I would like to talk more about it.
Fine. So now coming to the challenges, the challenge comes for a doctor. The challenge comes not only from the virus that we know very little about. Each day our thoughts are changing on it. But the greatest problem that we are facing is today, even from the patients who are being saved by the doctors, they are having a different source of opinion that doctors are the carriers of this virus. They are being, removed from their houses. Even different thought is emerging. So how do you see this challenge, Dr. Raman? And what have you faced anything like that?
I think yes, there is an element of panic, among all. Let it be frank about it, be it professionals or general public. So in a pandemic situation, the hospitals, clinics, even healthcare professionals are being seen as a potential source of infection, and this we have seen. Many healthcare providers are being discriminated by their communities. They are being seen as a risk for further spread. And places they also have been attacked. Some place people, asked to vacate their apartments and houses. At places, they are not welcome back into the community. So somehow many state governments have come forward with placing these healthcare providers at hotels and separate accommodation. But from our perspective, we are family physicians. We are not linked with the formal, the provision systems. And if we are providing direct care, we have to come back to our homes. So that is a challenge.
So luckily, today only we have this ordinance on the punishment and the fines being imposed. And also, I think a state like Karnataka, they have come up, and Odisha, they have done a wonderful job by even giving doctors the state honor in case anything goes wrong. So that's really commendable. And Dr. Sushila, anything that you see around?
So the situation of stigmatizing the healthcare providers, be it not only doctors, our nurses, ward boys, and all the people. Everybody wants to have a doctor in locality when they need one. Everybody wants to, when their relatives fall sick, they want to be seen by not 1, 10 doctors. And when it is a time when somebody is going out of their way, the doctors could easily sit at home and observe the lockdown. What's wrong with that? But if somebody is going out in these difficult times to help people, and then when he comes back, though he or she takes full precautions, observe social distancing, wears a mask, take care that, because it's not only to the risk to the society. The first risk is to his close loved ones, to his family, to his parents, to his brother, sister, and children. So why would somebody be negligent to bring and spread that virus in the society? Healthcare providers are well aware. They take all precautions and they'll continue to take all precautions. It is really sad on the part of the society to do like this. Doctors could be still little more fortunate. They own their own houses, so nobody can throw them out of their house. But look at the staff, look at the junior doctors, look at the nursing people who do not have even their own accommodation. They are on a rented accommodation. You do a 24 hours duty and you reach home, and then somebody says take your bags and go out. So this is the most unfortunate thing, and I recommend they should be handled with the utmost punishment what people deserve. Make it safer, more pleasant, not only physically, but give them mental relaxation also. If somebody is worried that if I go home and people are going to stare at me, they are going to throw my stuff out, where would I live? How can that person give undivided attention to the patients? It is for their own good. If the society will not look after doctors and the healthcare providers, it is going to backfire to the society itself. If the healthcare staff is not confident, is not saved, is not given proper PPE, who will look after the patients? So the patients will not be looked after, the mortalities would increase, and overall the spread of infection would also increase.
Fine, absolutely. Dr. Ravi, I'm sure you're not facing this much of problem in UK compared to what we have in India.
That's correct. I think it's very disturbing to hear what's happening in my own country, India. I think we have to have a different perspective how we look at our healthcare professional. And I think this pandemic will teach a very important lesson to general population that look, every healthcare professional, be it doctor, nurse, or admin staff or porters in the hospital, they're doing job. Every person in a different occupation is at home, but doctors and the healthcare professions are doing their job. For them, hospital is at home, and everybody's trying the best. So we have to respect the healthcare professional, what they're doing currently, or in fact, even if out of the COVID crisis. And I think I congratulate Odisha government for acknowledging their hard work. Yes, people do talk about it as a war zone, but when in a war situation and a soldier is facing the situation, there is a sense of fear that he may not return back home. But it's not the same situation with healthcare profession. When we go to the hospital, we go to save lives, we cure sick patients, and we are expected to come back home. And if you look at the data all across the world, the fatality is quite high in healthcare profession because of the nature of the work we do. So it's very unfair for us to devote our life for the patient care and carrying such a high risk, which would be detrimental to our health and its after effect. Now in NHS, we have very strict legislations that anybody is doing all the activities against doctor healthcare profession will be kind of punished severely. And apart from just legislation, there is a sense of responsibility amongst the general population that we should be respecting this group of people because they're trying their best. Healthcare safety is a paramount here because of we need to have the tier of workforce ready. The recent data which has come to us is amongst the fatality of 119 healthcare professionals, which includes various people, as I said, doctors, nurses, the healthcare assistants. And the worrying data we've got is the fatality rate is quite high amongst the Black and Asian minority people. Although it's a preliminary data, but it's quite troubling. It's quite worrisome.
Fine.
So the reason we want to make sure that we are ready for the job, that means we are adequately trained, we've got adequate PPE available, and we have adequate resources to do our job to our best ability.
I think the most important thing is societal responsibility, that you have an edge there in Britain. And same holds true for Kerala also, Dr. Rajgopal. I think there is no such untoward incident in Kerala.
No, that's not quite true, but some things are different. Yes, not that unlike in UK or USA, there are processions in front of our houses honoring us or anything. Things are difficult, but okay, we engage the community in palliative care. Our work closely engages the community. We have volunteers from the community. This is what the Astana Declaration asked all member countries to do in 2018, to make the community partners, and that's what we do. Now, when we go, 5 teams from our unit go out giving home visits to very ill patients. About half of them have cancer, the other could be a variety of anything. All people with serious health-related suffering. When we go there, usually the local volunteer will be with us. They know the community. We are usually warmly welcomed. Having said that, fear is a horrible thing, isn't it? In the early days of COVID, when we ring up, we are coming to visit today, it's quite a number, around 40% of the people on the first day said, don't come, it may be too dangerous for us. But that was only 2 or 3 days. It was mostly about public education, and gradually things are getting better. But there is this mistrust in the background. All of you doctors in the panel and those who are listening will, especially the more senior people, will realize that over a generation, a major shift has happened in the public perception of the medical profession. You might also remember that it is in this generation that health service got turned into healthcare industry. That certainly was a great paradigm shift. It's true that here we do not necessarily enjoy the trust that doctors enjoyed a generation back. You must also remember that 55 million Indians, according to an article in British Medical Journal in 2018, 55 million Indians, 4% of our population or more, are pushed below poverty line by catastrophic health expenditure. That happens as part of the system, and the doctor is the face of that health system for the patient. You are the enemy. The money is vanishing somewhere else where you can't even see it, but we are the face of it. The answer, in our experience, is to closely engage the community. Things are a bit better in Kerala, I must admit.
Fine. And Dr. Minimol, your experience?
So what is happening in the community, it is really sad. As healthcare workers, see, there are no public transport now. It is so difficult for the people to reach the hospital. The hospital is arranged the vehicle. They leave from, because in Mumbai, earlier people used to depend on the train, but now the organization is arranged bus service. So people who are coming from far, they leave early morning, they reach the hospital and they go back around, they reach home at 8 o'clock. And so they are working with so much passion. But if society, if they are going to stop us from working, how are we going to treat such patient? If no healthcare workers, we won't be able to. We here, we won't be able to treat patient. And here as administrators, we try to motivate our doctors, nurses, housekeeping staff to come ahead and work. So that motivation here we are trying a lot to keep them physically, mentally okay, and what is happening in the society not acceptable. Please, my one request is please allow us to work. Let us reach our hospital safely, do our duty, and allow us to go home and take rest, because the hospitals are providing enough PPEs, and the hospital is taking care of the employees. So the employees are not going to spread the infection at home. So allow us to work and allow us to serve the community.
Now, Dr. Raman, coming to the virus itself. Now, the first thing that comes to mind is protecting yourself, and then is the isolation. How do you isolate yourself, and how do you isolate the patients? So, what is the guideline as of today, and what you are doing there?
So as I said earlier, it is difficult to isolate in a community practice setting because our premises are small. So initially we were just screening on the basis of travel history or any contact history, but it is difficult. And as we see, there is a difference between hospital setting and community setting. In hospital, you are prepared. You have, sufficient space. You have, you have protocols in place. You have a staff logistics in place to do this segregation and screening. But in clinics, the dynamics between patient and doctor is also different. Somebody may, you don't have security guards to stop someone. You patient directly walk into your clinic and in front of you they sit. Many times, because of our cultural practice, we do not expect all our patients to be very conscious of protecting themselves or protecting people sitting in front of them. So it is very challenging. So we started with using masks and sanitizers, and but now as the more information about virus is evolving, we have advised all our members to use full PPE kit if at all they see any fever patients in community, and this has to be similar to any hospital setting. It cannot be different, a lower level of lower guard of protection. So if you are seeing patients in community, we have advised and we do advise to take full precautions, not only for yourself, but also for all your staff, reception, technicians, nurses, and whoever you have involved in your practice. So largely, luckily, in family practice, we can do with telemedicine and telephonic consultations, video consultations, which are very become popular. And almost 90% of our care can be provided. The common problems can be solved on telephonic consultation or video consultation that we have opted for, and largely we have limited our exposure direct face-to-face contact. And we think that in due course, if at all if we go into a bigger community spread problem, then we better keep ourselves protected for as a reserve force for future, if at all government requires or recruits family physicians for the public health system.
Fine. Dr. Sushila, your encounter, how do you protect yourself, and how have been your learning so far and your advice?
Well, as Dr. Raman said, never lower your guards. So I am fortunate to be working in a tertiary care level hospital, but all the protocols about this disease has been, we have prepared ourselves. So we have a mechanism by which you can at least segregate the symptomatic patients. But the problem with this virus is that there is a lot of asymptomatic patients. So almost your 40% of the patients, they themselves don't know that they could be infected. So as a result, we take everybody as infected. So every patient who comes to the hospital, patient and attendant, one is that you have to have least number of attendants, only one, no more. Regular indoor visits by the relatives and attendants have been stopped. Everybody who enters the hospital gate, we give them a mask to wear if they do not have. Now with the scarcity, you have to use your PPE and N95 also with the rationing. So what we give them a cloth mask to the patient and to the relatives. All the staff also in the hospital wears at least a 3-ply surgical mask. And those who are designated into specific areas, they are given N95 mask. But being a big hospital, and the requirements are going to increase also. So we have improvised upon some ways to decontaminate our N95 mask, because Even globally, there is a shortage of N95. Leave aside in India, everybody is going to face. So we have a decontamination process through which we can use one mask for at least 5 times or 6 times accordingly. Then coming to going to a particular, COVID areas, there is a proper way through which you wear your PPE, which is called a donning process. And then there is another process when you remove it, because maximum contamination happens while you are removing your PPE, which is called a doffing. So we have made some videos which keep on running in the doffing area, so that, and sometimes we have a CCTV coverage so that we can see that each member of your team is doing it properly, because you're as safe as your weakest link. Here your best player is not going to define your success. It is your weakest link which is going to define whether you succeed or you do not. So we take care of training very well, and the donning and doffing. And myself also, I sometimes ask my infection control nurse to view me when I am doffing, whether did I make any mistake, what was it, and all that. Post that, what we do is that everybody has to take a head to toe shower. Once you have doffed, you immediately go, you take a shower, you change into new clothes and move out of that area as early as possible. So these are the steps which we take, and we try to keep the shift of duty doctors as well as the nurses to low, to 6 hours, so that they don't have the urge to pass urine and to eat or drink something. So these are a few steps which have so far kept us going good. Hopefully in future also things will be good only.
So basically, it's a very strong monitoring within the institution that helps.
Ji, bilkul.
And Dr. Ravi, some thoughts on
Yeah, I think if you compare the size of the population we have in UK compared to India, we've got 65 million people to manage compared to what you have there, 1.3 billion plus. And as I said earlier, social responsibilities, I think, adapted very well here in general public. So people are following the guidelines given by government of UK as well as Public Health England in terms of social distancing, avoiding if it comes to hospital setting, people are avoiding visiting hospitals. We've set up teleconsultations for non-urgent cases. Even the urgent cases, people have been taking advice from our national helpline 111, and people have been recruited to give them the scientific advice. So if somebody calling 111 having some symptoms, they are making sure there are mild symptoms, and those can be managed at home with self-isolation. Only people who are needing an extra support, consider somebody has got comorbid factors, COPD or diabetes, or they are showing severe symptoms, they will be brought into hospital with appropriate screening. As Dr. Sushila said, I think we have to kind of marshal with our resources available. We have to have standard protocols which we are strictly following. So every hospital, every trust in the UK has got its own SOPs, which is as per the national guidelines. In terms of, I'll talk about orthopedics. As a surgeon, what we're doing is minimizing the entry of the patients to the hospital. We are following the PPE guidelines. We are minimizing the workforce exposure, and we're making sure that the patient do get the appropriate advice. In terms of the PPE shortage, yes, it's a universal problem, but luckily our government has resourced the adequate supply of PPE, and that has given us enough confidence to work to our potential. In terms of the managing patients when they're in hospital, in ICU setup, we've got a framework ready for the critical care management. So we got somebody in control and command, and the team is given a specific job. And I'm sure people would agree with me. If the team has given a specific job, they perform better. And if they have an adequate training, if they have enough support, which is physical and for the mental well-being, and given appropriate instructions, the output would be far better.
Now, coming to the next question, what role does the technology play, or is capable of playing in such situations? So again, Dr. Sushila first.
technology is our friend and we should use it to the maximum, because nowadays, like e-consultations, you can solve almost 80 to 90% of the problems, if not permanently, but you can just buy time by doing an e-consultation with the patients. One is that. Secondly, we are using e-consultation, the technology, to monitor our patients in the ICU also, so that we can send least number of doctors and least number of nurses, and the routine like transcription thing, just monitoring of the things, can be done outside the hospital, outside the ICU unit, where PP is not required. So you save on your PP, you are exposing less people, so you save on your manpower staff. Similarly, like for the rounds, those patients who are not very sick, you need not to physically go and talk to them, so you can have a like we are on Zoom, or we are on a platform where we are talking electronically. Similarly, what I do with my patients, if I see them on the morning rounds and I see them they're not going to have much problem in the evening, what I do is I just FaceTime or call them on phone and find out what if there is any problem. So we make our visits whenever it is very necessary, not otherwise. So this is how I use. Then we have in the ICUs, we have a CMS, continuous monitoring systems, which helps us save at least one resident doctor. We send one resident doctor less than what otherwise in a normal scenario we would have saved done. So these are the few things which we are doing to reduce the number of healthcare people being exposed, be still safe to the patient, be more effective, and still maintaining that kind of empathy and connect with the patient.
Dr. Raman, now, what's your take on technology? How it is helping you, or you are practicing it?
Yes. So although there are a lot of new products and tools have come up, especially during the lockdown period, and we have been observing during past 5-10 years, there's been a lot of activity in the digital consultation and e-consultation domain. But from the family physician's perspective, in my own practice, we have tried to make it simple. It's good that things are converging on phone. So having a phone number, which is everybody has presently in India, a smartphone everybody has, phone, smartphone, Google Forms, uh, uh, Google Forms and WhatsApp and things like Paytm. So I've been able to do at least 5 to 10 consultations a day on technology, which is easy to we are not going for any hi-fi technology platform, but we are able to maintain a continuity of care for basic tech services. And I think in due course of time, better interfaces will come, and it will become more better. And as it has been recently only legalized in India, earlier we used to do a lot of informal discussions, consultations on phone, but now the MCI, Medical Council of India, has approved. So, this will become better and more advanced in future.
Now, finally, to come to Dr. Rajagopal, tell us something about the emotional stress, not only of the patients, but of the doctors, nurses, and entire healthcare workforce. So you have come up with a online program supporting the healthcare providers. Tell us something more about that.
Thank you. So we have come up with two programs. One is, as you say, just to cater to the emotional, psychosocial issues. Many of you live in big cities, and the kind of problems that our nurses go through, majority being women, and very often a family that may say, "Stop working, report sick, don't go to work. You are endangering your own child." That kind of is a common problem. So these are issues that we have to address. The girls are caught between two needs. I have to serve my patients, and here I am endangering my family, and I'm seen as an enemy in my own family. So we created an online support system for them, but also for something else. See, COVID treating doctors are at enormous stress, and the satisfaction that they get out of their work is often limited, because they see that the majority of patients going on ventilators are elderly people with comorbidities, and you can guess the outcome. The satisfaction from their work is limited, and this is unfair to patients. So one of the programs that we are now doing, we do it from Monday to Saturday every day. on 1 hour and 15 minutes every day. So this is to empower doctors in proper triaging, COVID treating doctors, and also to offer the patients the alternative of palliative care rather than futile artificial life support. So following the triage, if the patient is counseled, the family is counseled, and then if it's breathlessness, they get the appropriate treatment. And all the breathlessness that's now treated by pushing in a endotracheal tube down the throat is now meted out in a more compassionate way. Similarly, delirium, intense restlessness, and agitation, they are fairly easy to manage if you have a protocol there. So this program actually teaches doctors to manage palliative care in patients who may not be good candidates for aggressive life support. I'm not saying that we create palliative care departments in all those places. Every COVID treating doctor is schooled in the fundamentals of palliative care. In Dr. Devi's country, every medical student is aware of this because they have gone through medical education, including palliative care. Whereas in our country, only from 2019, it has come to be a part of medical education. This is all new for our medical system. So that's why this education is brought about.
Fine. Now coming to the final issue of how prepared we are for similar epidemics coming in near future. We have got a lot of learnings. We have learned about isolation, policy, too many. I mean, everyone has his own perception, lockdown. But from a doctor's perspective, how prepared you are for your own safety in case there is a next epidemic coming. So Dr. Raman first.
I think this was a steep learning curve for everyone, and almost all domains of governance, care provision, administration has been challenged, and we like everyone else, we are also trying to cope up and learn along with what is has suddenly happened. Just 1 month back, we were all relaxed and fine in the day-to-day life, and suddenly things have changed. And I think we are lucky in a way in India that given the population, we still do not have such a big number that we see in Europe and in other states. So we have sufficient time to prepare ourselves. This has also come with some positive, observations. I would say, like, the cooperation between the governments, the state government, central government has been, tremendous. And our administrative capacity, which has, focused on healthcare, that is also, we must appreciate how the various state governments have put all their force and their energy and their resources on combating this epidemic, and this will help us in a long run to be prepared for any such challenge in future. I think this will make our health systems and our country stronger in due course.
Fine. Dr. Sushila, your thoughts on the next epidemic coming? How would you like to protect and help the doctors to be prepared? Because a lot of not only
Well,
the doctors die, I find a lot of doctors also.
all right. So I
And
will
the
say,
real problem is not able to identify who is positive.
pardon, Loda? Sorry, I missed some conversation
Lot of
there.
even the patient, you're not able to figure out who is positive and who is negative unless until he's diagnosed.
That's true. So, when somebody asks, are we enough prepared? I say this is like if you're asking somebody, do you have enough money? So nobody has enough money and nobody is enough prepared. But we are as prepared as it can be to handle this epidemic first. And, we are anticipating the surge has not come in India. My colleague from UK has a good experience that way. So we haven't seen something like this. Time only will tell whether we pass, we fail. But yes, I see a silver lining in this whole process. People in India have started taking health as a priority. People have learned how to wash their hands. People know that there is a personal space. You don't impinge or you don't go into that personal space, which is called social distancing. People will, after this epidemic whole process, maybe our whole perspective towards nature will change. Maybe we will be more organized to deal with something like this, which comes in future. So there is a lot of learning. So this disease is a teacher. It's teaching us, and how well we take the lessons will define our future.
I think the most important thing will be our spending in healthcare that has to increase. That
Exactly.
will be one. And how about the PPEs?
Suddenly we had deficiency, but now a lot of players have come in, and PPE is being manufactured. But again, the question is quality. Somebody who just comes up for a epidemic phase, we do not know how good quality that would be, and a bad quality product is worse than having no product, because this gives you a false sense of security, and then you risk your life further. So having a PPE is not the question. Having a good quality PPE and a good mask is important. I really do not know what is the big fuss about this jumpsuit. What I think is this is so uncomfortable to work in. This PPE should be modified, and we have modified it for ourselves. A full-length gown, and having more workable PPEs is what we require. I'd like to hear views from my colleague from UK, whether they still practice that thing or what is happening. But PPE is being manufactured, and I think we would have sufficient in future.
Fine. So, Dr. Ravi, two things.
Yeah.
One about the PPE, and the other one is on future. How prepared we should be for the learnings we have got.
Right. So I think I'll go to the second question first, Shahid. This pandemic has taught us a lot of lessons. I think we've realized here that we are fighting against an invisible enemy, and the enemy is not visible. However we prepared, we will fall short. We can only control the damage which is going to happen here and minimize our risk. I think there are two important things for us to learn is social responsibility. I think everybody needs to take responsibility of their health. You can't just expect government or the doctors to do everything for you. And I think it's a good lesson for general population that the hand hygiene, social distancing, I don't know how practical it is a country like India. But looking after your own health, because we all know that the prevention is the best cure, and as long as you manage your health, do your exercise, because we've learned that the patients with comorbid factors like hypertension, diabetes, COPD are vulnerable to have the severe illness. And this is the time that the people in India or all across the world have to invest in their health. It's not just a monetary, but it's something which we need to give importance. I think the wealth can be earned and lost, but if the health is lost, it has got significant implication, not for your family, but for the entire healthcare sector. So yes, I'll go back to what Dr. Sushila says. We either pass or fail, but my philosophy is different here. Either we succeed or we learn. I don't consider myself ever fail, because we always learn. So rather than failure, I think what we learn is important, and how we take that learning and reflect on it would be much crucial. And how we engage our own country's healthcare sector and prevent further crises like this is entirely up to our hand now. Going back to PPE, means I was operating for 4 hours yesterday with FFP3 masks, with our visors and all sort of gears on. And at the end of it, the one thing I want to do is just get rid of everything, because it's so suffocating. Okay, as a surgeon, we want to minimize our risks. We are dealing with aerosol generating procedures, so we put ourselves at significant risk there. But we have to prepare, isn't it? I mean, by doing all these things, we are not preventing getting exposed to infection. We are just minimizing it. And we all talk about which kind of mask to be used, whether we use N95, which is an American terminology, or we use FFP3 or FFP2, which is the European terminologies. I think you got to take precautions. You got to take precautions. We all know that this is aerosol-borne infection, or it could be passed on with a contaminant. So whatever measures have been suggested by a particular country's body, I think we should adhere to that. The most important thing is don't take things in your own hand. Follow the advice given by advisory committee and scientific committee, and please everybody do help our healthcare professional to do their job to their potential. I think that is the best way we can survive through this current crisis.
Fine. And Dr. Minimol, I'm sure you must be having a checklist for healthcare workers, and this must be improving every day. So how do you see this? And also the future?
Okay. So in each hospital, the hospital so as being a hybrid hospital, we do treat COVID and non-COVID patients. So there is a checklist. So there are various restrictions for visitors, staff. So in the checklist from the administrative side, we need to know how many workforce you need every day to work. We cannot call everybody to the hospital and expose them to the this high risk areas. So there is a proper screening happens at the entry. Then restricting the visitors. So avoid visitors. So max one visitor for a patient. But that also we encourage if patient is healthy, we ask them to go home. And whatever talk happens is only through mobile. And so allow restricting the visitors. That is the next thing. And in the checklist, when it goes to the COVID positive area, so there are nurses, doctors, and housekeeping staff is working. So the day when it starts, so as administrators, we make sure their stay is proper because their physical health is very, very important. So they have been given high protein diet, and then comes the judicious use of PPE. So we make sure enough PPE with N95 mask is available with a good quality PPE. Then once they do duty, so as Dr. Sushila said, it is only 6 hours duty because it is very difficult to work with the PPE. So they do the 6 hours duty. When they come out, there is a doffing area with a shower with the antiseptic solution is provided. So they go to wherever they are, the accommodation which is created in the hospital, only after shower they can enter that area. So that is the workplace safety for the COVID area. Then in the hospital, there are lot of high risk areas because see in Mumbai, lot of small hospitals are shut down, which cater to the dialysis patient, chemotherapy patient who are receiving chemotherapy. So we do cater to this type of patient. So these are areas which we segregate as high risk area. Your emergency department. So some little extra precautions. So those who are going, the patient who are going to come in with a proper screening only, they will enter the area. Again, restricting the visitors. And the staff, healthcare workers who are working in those areas are given N95 masks and some amount of PPEs because as we don't know now who are positive because a lot of asymptomatic people are walking in. So we consider every person who is walking into the hospital as positive. So we encourage all patients to wear the mask when they are in the patient room. Patient and relatives 100% need to wear the mask when they enter the hospital premises. So taking care of staff, taking care of relatives, and avoid maintaining social distancing. This is how we are currently managing.
Right. And how do you see how prepared you are, your learnings for the future epidemic coming in?
So this COVID has taught us a good lesson as public is learned about importance of hand hygiene, personal hygiene in the hospital also. So the biggest task we used to have improving hand hygiene compliance. We used to tell patient, we used to monitor doctor-wise, nurses, housekeeping, hand hygiene. But I think now almost all hospitals are gone into a 100% compliance because now everybody is aware. So they have to do hand hygiene, hand wash with soap and water. So that's a bigger relief for us because people are aware it is very, very important. I think India, we had a good strategy. We had a proper lockdown period. The government officials is restricting people movement. So we are in good control, but still we can't say what is going to be ahead. And I think opening more COVID hospitals and having hybrid work in certain hospital is balancing. COVID hospitals, because every state there is certain hospitals are designated as COVID hospitals. So it is being taken care. Enough tests are happening. I think we are set, but let's keep our fingers crossed and watch how is it going to happen in May. I think we are doing our level best to treat patients and control the spread.
I think it's a learning for both the doctors and the patients. They have learned a lot of lessons. Now, what exactly is lockdown? They were not prepared. No one was even thinking of the word lockdown. But again, one thing that strikes me is hand hygiene. I think the generation gap. If you look at India 50 years back, I mean, washing hands was a very essential part of daily life. I don't know where it's gone for a toss. Now we are getting the guidelines and how to wash hands. You have to learn, and in the offices, hospitals, everywhere you will find a board there that tells you how to wash. We were washing it, maybe not the very scientific way, but it was a part of the protocol of their everyday life and living. But suddenly, I don't know, it's a generation shift or what to say that. Anyway, now thank you all for sharing your valuable insights on protecting doctors against COVID-19. The recording of this webinar will be made available at our website. So please take note of that, and we will be carrying forward more similar engagements with doctors. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Syed. Thank you.
Thank you, Syed. Thank you.